Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's SRIDA Industry Roundtable. We have a star-studded panel of guests that I'll be introducing to you shortly. But in the meantime, I'm just going to take a quick look through today's agenda. So, Joanne, would you mind throwing that on screen, please? Thank you very much. Next. Great, thank you very much. So in a moment, I'll be introducing you to Cecile Huet and Björn Uretsky, who are going to do the welcome and opening comments from the European Commission. Then we'll be welcoming Frederick Heinz, onto the stage to present Adra's strategic orientations for the next SRIDA and some of the big ticket priorities, and I'll help to drive some of the discussion for the roundtable. So for the roundtable, we'll be inviting Francesco Pero, Jeva Martin Caneta, Jussi Karlgren, Carl Toon, Michael Pfeiffer, Rich Walker, and Robert Brockmeyer to the discussion. And so in the first instance, next, Joanne, I'd like to welcome Cecile and Björn to do the introductions, please.
Good morning, everyone. Do you hear me? Okay. I'm Cecile Huet, Head of Unit Robotics and AI Innovation and Excellence at the Commission. And the scope of our activities is mainly to support research, innovation, and deployment of these technologies. So as you can see, Adra is at the core of our activities together, and we work in collaboration with our sister unit dealing with data, where Björn's coming from. So I don't need to tell you how important are AI, data, and robotics technologies for Europe. Adra is expected to play a major role to drive the strategy about development and deployment of these technology in Europe. And as you know, sovereignty in this technology is important. We need to have Europe, and Adra need to have on board strong European industry defining the strategy and implementing such a strategy, which is critical for European sovereignty. In the domain, indeed, we will see a transformative effect of these technologies. So it's very important that we master these technologies, we master the development so that we can decide the way we want to use them. It is therefore critical that you, industrial developers and users of this technology, really drive the strategy so that we know your needs and it replies to your need, meets your need, and we are really strong in Europe. So your voice and active role is key to make Europe really a leader in these technologies. And as you know, combining these technology is also really essential. So making robots smarter or extracting useful knowledge from the data is essential. And this is why we created Adra. And the importance of AI in general has been very much stressed in the State of the Union by the President recently, and the Commissioner Breton really stressed as well the importance of AI and also listed the strategy we want to put in place. And in order to influence it and to drive it, we expect also Adra to really gather a lot of strategic industry to really make sure that we have really a strong leadership in that. And Commissioner Breton in his blog listed a number of support that we are going to provide to AI in general, so such as access to HPC, which is really becoming a key aspect for AI development, especially in the new sort of AI that we're seeing in the generative AI, for instance. We also will support startup to make sure that we really have the startup which develop an AI in a way which meet the value we have in Europe and in a responsible way. So also, the Commissioner Breton mentioned the important role that Adra has in leading this strategy. So this is to repeat again how important Adra's role is, and therefore the industry gathered by Adra is really key. So we count on you in this roundtable and also to join Adra in order to make this a reality, and to also join effort at European level so that worldwide we can also be very competitive internationally. So Adra is also an important access to the Commission in terms of policy development to influence the policy and the funding opportunities. So again, make your voice heard, be very active in this Adra partnership, and hopefully all together we will make it happen in Europe. Thank you for your work, and let's work together.
Thank you very much for those words, Cecile. Björn, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, sure. I mean, can you hear me well? Yes, excellent. I mean, first of all, thanks for Adra and Philippe and all the colleagues there for putting this event together. I think it's a very important and pertinent event, and I'm really happy to be here. And yeah, a warm welcome to all participants, in particular also to the big data community. Adra will also serve for us, the unit dealing with big data, as the primary channel for engagement with the big data community. And what we want to get out of this, of course, is out of Adra, I mean, to inform us about your research needs, and also to ensure that the legislation we put forward goes hand in hand with the research and deployment actions that we support financially. The first topic that comes there to mind in that context where we need your input, of course, is Horizon Europe. I mean, just to mention a couple of topics that we have put forward for the next work programs. One is, for example, to develop tools that ensure compliance with existing and emerging legislation. I'm just mentioning the Data Governance Act, the Data Act, or the GDPR. So this is for us as policymakers a very important topic. Another topic is technologies and tools for managing, federating, and validating data sets for AI and data spaces so that they are of high quality, portable, and interoperable. And Cecile mentioned already the importance of data for AI. So this is really an important topic. But there might be other topics. And this is really where you come in, and we really count on your expertise and on your feedback. Where your input matters, though, goes beyond Horizon Europe. I also want to mention briefly the Digital Europe program. As you know, the Digital Europe program focuses more on deployment actions, and the part we are responsible for in particular focuses on data spaces. So we've already invested around 300 million euros in this area to support data spaces in areas such as agriculture, mobility, tourism, or manufacturing. And of course, what we want to know from you is, are these really the big areas? Are there other important areas where maybe we're missing? What are the building blocks we need to support as part of our investments in the Digital Europe program? The next point, I think, where we really count on your feedback is your views on our legislation. We have now put forward what we believe is the most comprehensive framework for data governance in the world. We have, for example, the Data Governance Act, which deals with trust in data exchanges. We have established new mechanisms such as data intermediaries, which connect data producers with data users. We have recently concluded negotiations on the Data Act, which ensures that the value of data is fairly distributed along the value chain. And of course, the goal of all these legislations is to make data available for innovation, in particular AI. But I mean, for that to happen, we also need your feedback. Does it work on the ground? Do you maybe see a need for adjustments? This is really where I think your opinion would really matter. Another area which is very important for us, and where I think you with your expertise can help us as well, is standardization. I mentioned already data spaces, and a lot of innovation will also happen between data spaces. So we have to make sure that they stay interoperable, that you have functional data exchange standards. And this is really, I think, where you with your practical day-to-day expertise can really help us a lot to get this part right. Finally, and while our focus at the moment is really completely on implementation of all the legislations I mentioned, we're also slowly looking ahead, of course, what could happen in the future. So what are the big tickets of the future? What are the big ideas which maybe we have to focus a bit more in the next collage? So this is another area I think where your input and expertise would be absolutely crucial. So as you can see, it's a very extensive list of topics where we need your feedback, ranging from classical research and innovation actions under Horizon Europe to deployment actions under the Digital Europe program, feedback on our legislation, standardization, and also the big ideas for the future. And your input is really crucial for us because you're closer to the ground, so to speak. You know what happens on the ground. And for that reason, your voices really matter. And I can only really strongly encourage you to participate in Adra, provide feedback, which is then fed to us and which we can take into account. And on that note, I wish you a successful event, and I hand the floor back to, I guess, Philippe. Philippe.
Yeah, thanks very much to Björn and Cecile for their introductions. I think you really set you laid out what the ambition is for Europe going forward. And I think these types of webinars really offer an opportunity for industry, but the broad range of stakeholders to feed back and help to refine the policies that are being deployed. So thank you again to Björn and Cecile. So now, Joanne, if you could just click to the next slide, please. I would like to bring Frederick in to help set the context a little bit. Frederick's going to discuss the process that we've been through already to consult and engage with some of those stakeholders. And he will present some of the big ticket priorities, which we'll be reflecting on in the panel discussion later on. So Frederick, would you like to come in, please?
Yes, please. So thank you very much. If I may share my screen, I would appreciate it. So if you stop sharing. Yes, so good morning, everyone. My name is Fredrik Heinz, and it's my great pleasure here to present both give a very brief introduction to Adra, but also to present the work that we have been doing on our strategic research, innovation, and deployment agenda, where this webinar today is an important part. So, of course, one of the major goals of Adra is really to engage the industry community and to get your input on what are the research, innovation, and deployment priorities that we as an organization should focus on. And in order to facilitate this discussion, I have this introduction. So first of all, of course, we have Adra. So, I mean, we've been so the whole goal here is to have this partnership, public-private partnership on AI, data, and robotics. And the Commission is investing 1.3 billion euros into this, and the private side is expected to invest at least as much. And the overarching mission is to secure European sovereignty over AI, data, and robotics, but also to establish European leadership in these areas to get this high socioeconomic and environmental impact, and to reinforce a strong and global competitive position. So we really aim to boost the industrial leverage of AI, data, and robotics in Europe. And we are currently have a little bit more than 100 members, as we really want to leverage the existing European strength in AI, data, and robotics. We are striving to be open and inclusive, so we are always looking for new members, and there will be more information about that coming, and to build this broad European dialogue, but also to balance and safeguard these different disciplines, AI, data, and robotics, through this convergence that we are seeing between this, so that we can really build a unique and strong ecosystem for AI, data, and robotics that represent all of the important stakeholders. And of course, we are we're targeting many different groups, all ranging from big industry to small and medium enterprises and startups, to RTOs and universities, but also to end users. And Adra provides provides values to all of these organizations and target groups. Today, the focus is on industry. I would say that one of the main reasons why focusing on industry is so important is, of course, that industry is the backbone for Europe. And I mean, you are the ones driving research, innovation, and deployment. But we also see that investments from the private side is lagging behind in Europe compared to other parts of the world. And of course, we want to change this. Together with the Commission, we are really pushing to how can we increase the investment and engagement in AI data and robotics from the private side. So if we're then looking at this strategic research, innovation, deployment agenda, so this work started roughly a year ago, and we have been producing a strategic orientation paper that was presented before the summer in June, where we laid out the kind of foundations for the work that we are now finalizing as part of these big ticket items that we will come to. So what we have identified is that there are a number of global challenges that we need to address. For example, we see this global dependence on essential resources. We have the challenges with demographics and so on. And in some sense, the essence here is that we will need smarter ways of working. We need to use our limited resources in much more efficient ways. And we strongly believe that AI data and robotics will be a foundational technology for making sure that we have competitive industry and a high quality welfare for all citizens. So what we then identified was 5 strategic high-level directions to focus on trustworthy ADR technology made in Europe in compliance with regulation. So we really want to meet regulation with innovation. We should achieve European strategic autonomy in ADR. So, and we also want to increase the resilience of our society, both natural and man-made. And we want to help achieve the Green Deal with a sustainable society, zero carbon emission. And of course, education, reskilling, upskilling is a major part in doing this. We also identified 5 strategic technical directions on large-scale, general-purpose, generative ADR technology. So, of course, the big topic of the day is generative AI. And of course, this is really something that is on the top of our mind as well, and on top of this list. And we also need, if we want to push this out in society and into industry, we need large-scale, complex ADR testbeds together with end users, where this technology can really be hardened and improved and made sure to really work in real-world conditions. And related to this, we also need this multi-stakeholder development, verification, validation, and integration of automated decision-making so that we can help making better decisions. So actually, I think that one of the key enablers, or rather one of the key functionalities that are enabled by ADR technology is how can we, both as individuals, organizations, countries, and so on, make better decisions and to support this decision making, but to do that in a safe and validated way. We also see that the autonomous systems, I mean, robotics is a strong area in Europe and has been for a long time, where we are seeing much more collaborative, interactive autonomous systems working together with people in different situations, solving complex tasks. And here we see this is another important strategic research direction. And last but definitely not least, it's also about metrics for measuring progress. So in order to make sure that we actually are making progress, that we are developing this technology in a positive direction, we need to be able to understand and measure this, and that we do through different metrics. So these are the kind of 10 high-level directions, both on a strategic level and on a technical level. And based on these, we are now developing the final, or not the final, but the next version of the Strategic Research Innovation Deployment Agenda. So this work started in July, There we presented the result of the first part, the strategic positioning paper. We had a very successful workshop together with the Commission, and then we also had on the day after we had another successful workshop together with the networks of research excellence in AI. All the networks were represented, and we took the next step towards achieving and completing the second, or well, I guess it's the fourth strategic research and innovation deployment agenda. Now during the summer, we have had a number of working groups working on these, and now we're presenting a little bit of that result. And by the end of the month, we intend to have the next draft of the SRIDA. We also, of course, want to take your input into that work. And then the plan is to have the SRIDA ready by the end of October to be launched at the ADR Forum on November 8 and 9 in Versailles. So that's the process going forward. The current table of contents that we're aiming for is to draw the large picture, the ADR vision for 2030. We then identify these major trends and gaps. I've presented some of them already. And then the main focus is, of course, the next strategic plan for the upcoming period here of 2025 to 2027. Here we will start with these big tickets in AI, data, and robotics, but also how can we go from research to innovation and deployment, the kind of process, because we see that that is a very important part. How do we progress these technologies through this TRL, the technology readiness levels, to make sure that technology is really ready for the real world and to be able to really contribute and to not cause any major issues. And related to that, we also have trustworthiness and social acceptance. So we see here that Europe, of course, is really pushing this agenda, which we strongly embrace. And we also need to focus on education, reskilling, upskilling to make sure that we have the talent, the people that we need, and also to prepare people for the transition and the changes that we are part of and that is currently ongoing. So with that, we can make sure that as many people as possible can be part of this, and also that the industry can find the people that they need to hire. And last, we also have impact and visibility. How do we make sure that all the great work that's being done here in Europe both gets the impact, but also gets the visibility that it deserves, because we are doing so much good and great work here that often might not be as noticeable as we believe that it deserves to be. So now we are reaching the big ticket items. So we are working with 6 big ticket items. And the first one is really on the groundbreaking technological foundations in ADR. So of course we need to do basic research in all the different components, AI, data, and robotics components, but also putting them together into larger building blocks and more sophisticated technologies, so that we can enable the groundbreaking developments in this area. So areas that are important here are, for example, autonomy. How do we make our systems more autonomous, but also in a more resilient and robust manner? We also want them to have high performance. And in many cases, this is often the focus. How do we increase the performance? But we also want to do this with prediction, so that we can or rather with predictability, so that we not only have high performance, but that we also know when it will perform well, where there are issues. So one very interesting area is, of course, how do we get these systems to have some kind of understanding or model of their own quality or behavior, so that when it is sure about itself, then it should be sure, but in some other areas it might be less certain. And I guess all of you have been noticing these features of this, for example, the ChatGPT being super self-confident, no matter how correct it is. And this is then an example of where these systems fail to understand their own limitations. And of course, yes. And then we have the second big ticket item, effective and trustworthy general purpose AI. So this is where we really want to push these frontiers in the latest development. For example, when it comes to generative AI, these large language models, foundation models, and so on and so forth. So we really get this large scale general purpose technology. But at the same time, we want to be effective, both in the way that it actually solves real problems and that it contributes value, but also that it minimizes the resources being used. So we see today that there is a big question mark regarding the kind of environmental impact of these large-scale systems. Can we find technological developments which reduces the environmental impact? Then, of course, this would be highly desirable. And also, these technologies need to be trustworthy. Of course, we want them to be compliant with the both existing and upcoming regulation. And we want the users and the developers and so on to be able to trust this technology. So therefore, that's an essential part of it. The third big ticket item, which was also mentioned in the introduction, I think by Björn, is that we need this interoperable, integrated framework for data and model ecosystems, so that we see that today what we're going towards is more data-driven methods, more data-driven organizations, more data-driven decision-making, so that we actually base these decisions on correct and real-time data collected in appropriate manners. So we need to build these ecosystems for collecting, managing, sharing, curating, and so on of data, but also that it's not only the data itself, but also models where we have in some sense refined the data into models, and we can use these in various applications. So here there are issues. I mean, how do you in an effective way operate these? How should you govern these ecosystems? How do you deal with privacy and security, which is just increasing in importance? As we see that there are a whole range of important questions related to data and model ecosystems. The fourth big ticket item is around next generation smart embodied robotic systems. So as I already said, robotics is a really strong area for Europe. And of course, we should build on our strengths. So therefore, we want to take the next step when it comes to these smart and embodied systems, where we're combining all the ADR technologies together in really pushing the frontier when it comes to, say, soft robotics, autonomy, manipulation, human-robot interaction and collaboration, smart mobility, and so on and so forth, where we see that there is both a lot of economic value, but also where Europe is already doing very well. The fifth big ticket items is that what we are currently seeing is more or less a revolution in many different scientific disciplines, where AI data and robotics technologies are really enabling new types of research to be done. We have seen, for example, AlphaFold solving the protein folding problem. We are seeing now how AI technology can help find new materials that people couldn't design by themselves. We are seeing social scientists being able to study and understand much larger societal phenomena through the use of AI and other ADR-related technologies. So it's really the question of how can we enable better science in all the other disciplines through this technology. And I strongly believe that actually we will see a lot of scientific breakthroughs in other disciplines based on the technology that we developed. And of course, Adra want to be a major driving force in this as well. And the sixth big ticket items is research, innovation, and tools for compliance. So this is really where we're focusing on how can we really support different organizations to be compliant. And there is a lot of research innovation needed in order to be able to deploy compliant systems. So here we have a broad range of issues related to trust, privacy, security, so that in the end, what we want to do is to come up with methods for compliant by design, so that we can ensure that the technology developed here in Europe really is compliant and is driving the global change towards more trustworthy AI, data, and robotics technology. So we are also contemplating whether we should focus on open moonshots for Europe. So what we are seeing on the global level is that we see individual organizations focusing on large problems and really making huge impact. So one of the questions we are asking ourselves is how can we do something similar for Europe? And we really think it's urgent that if we want to be able to take this step, being able to deliver really impressive major results in comparable to going to the moon, we really need to act quickly. And we are now opening up and asking whether you are also interested in pushing this together with us. And to kind of conclude, this was a recent study from Harvard Business School, where basically showing that by using AI, it really improves the quality of work. That what we can see is that, or what we can expect is that companies that really take advantage of this technology really will have a competitive advantage. I mean, sometimes there is this discussions that AI will have a, I mean, there will be a challenge for mankind. I strongly believe that AI will not outcompete people, but rather people and organizations that effectively use AI, data, and robotics will outcompete those that don't. So therefore, we think it's imperative to support you and your organization in really taking advantage of this technology so that we can make sure that we have a competitive industrial sector in Europe. And of course, we really want you to join us. As I said, we have more than 100 members already, and together we will be stronger. Together we can really push the technology, making sure that we get the benefits and making sure that Europe really takes advantage of this technology, maximizing the benefits while minimizing the risks. Let's innovate and not only regulate. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Frederick. I think it was a great kind of whistle-stop tour of all the big ticket items that we've been working through over the past few months. And I think you also set out the kind of beginnings of a big vision, perhaps, as well, that we'll be discussing during the panel as well. So if possible, I'd like to ask all participants in the roundtable to turn the videos on now, please. And Joanne, if you could just throw up the slides so I can run through participants and introduce them very, very briefly. Each one of them will have a few minutes just to also further introduce themselves, say where they're from, and just give an initial reflection on the big ticket items that Frederick presented there, whether they see themselves and their business interests reflected adequately in that, and or if there's something missing from from that list. So in alphabetical order, Francesco Ferro, CEO of Power Robotics, will be joining. Eva Martin-Kenaita, who's Senior Vice President, Head of Research and Innovation at Telenor. You'll see Carl Principal AI Scientist, Silo AI. Carl Kutun, who's the founder of Greenometer. Michael Pfeiffer, AI Research at Bosch. Rich Walker, Director, Shadow Robot Company. And Robert Bruckmeyer, who's the Department Head of AI-based car functions at BMW Group. Welcome to you all. And in a moment. I mean, if we could start with Francesco, it'd be really good if you could, again, just introduce yourself and perhaps tell Robotics, and just give us your initial reflections on those big ticket items. Do you see yourself as a company reflected there? Do you see anything missing from that list? So please, would you mind giving some initial thoughts?
Hi, Philips. Thanks for invite me in this call. So I'm Francesco Ferro, an engineer, Italian engineer, but mounted Robotics, a Spanish company doing service robotics. Okay, so we are also a member of EurObotics. I'm also one of the director, and yes, the dream and the goals of Adra, in my opinion, are very, very challenging. So about what is missing, a lot of things. So the truth is that we are really to push in order to make this happen. But the good point, in my opinion, is exactly the collaboration that we need to have with big data and mainly with AI. So Adra, in my opinion, is the perfect ecosystem in order to make this kind of things happening. And so still we need to find the best way in order to collaborate together. But in my opinion, we are on a good path. You have already seen in the presentation all the agenda that we have in order to do this kind of things happening. And the idea is that this kind of thing didn't happen alone. So we needed to just push in order to make this happen. So the missing part, in my opinion, is just to collaborate even more, not only from a research point of view, but also from company point of view, because sometimes also even company by company, there's still a lot of things that could be done. Example, a clear example in robotics is that we need AI. We are using a lot of big data, and so we need this kind of association collaboration with the other companies. So the message is positive from my point of view, but still we need to work a lot to make this happening. And then I pass the word to some other, because if not, I take all the time.
Thanks very much, Francesco. Yeah, so collaborating to kind of make the ecosystem work more closely together, I think it's a good point. David, would you mind if I come to you, please? So do you see Telenor reflected in this strategy? Do you see missing elements?
Thanks a lot. So first of all, I think what has been said both by Björn and Cecile, I think we all relate to that. We need to have, the autonomy. We need to have, sovereignty is important for Europe. We really need to make, European research in AI, robotics, and data adopted. So I kind of relate very well and very much to what has been said at the very high level. What Fredrik said about the big items, certainly that is very important, and I can relate to. I think the ambition level, if I look at these 6 items, I think it's very ambitious, and that's not necessarily bad. From Telenor perspective, we are a global telecom operator. We've been using big data and AI technologies for many years. For us now, what's coming is really a productivity gain. We see that probably from 10 to 20% of our workforce, our workloads on take it marketing or sales organization, take all support functions. This is just laying at the door. We just know that we need to use it as fast as possible, and we're doing it as many others. So productivity is probably the big shot now for us, is just taking and doing it, because otherwise we are also not the highest growing industry in the world. So we all look for kind of the very probably shorter term efficiency gains. So that's what generative AI brings us to. So this is kind of short-term business language. But if I look at these items, I think a couple of reflections that I have. One, I think we need to continue doing foundational research in Europe, particularly where Europe is strong at. Let's take large language models. I truly believe that Adra and other communities in Europe have to step up on building Gen AI or large language or small or medium language models for European languages. That's a no-brainer for me. And this is where Telenor, as many other companies, are looking in options. Now we are just testing all options, probably 4 or 5. And then we are short of large European language. I'm looking for what Silo will say, because I know that they're working hard on making that available. That's one. The second reflection I have is on this. I'm very supportive of providing technology tools for compliance and actually using trustworthy AI. When Europe comes with the regulation on AI, Europe needs to come with research and support on tooling. I can tell you probably the biggest challenge and stumbling blocks we are facing in the company and in the industry is the privacy and compliance officers who are sitting in blind and in gray zone on actually trying to assess and as I say, move from POC sickness to scale of generative AI. So how can actual research communities and innovation communities help us to create those tools that we can actually have this technology used? And so I really support that compliance, tooling, and trustworthy AI element. And the last, I think what's missing, cybersecurity threats for our industries are just going to skyrocket. We've seen it. I haven't seen actually very specifically where Europe stands in using these, very powerful AI models for creating high resilience and cybersecurity leadership in the world. We have all, I think, opportunities to do that, but I think we need to step up a little bit on the mission statement that we actually are stepping up in building. And that's not only AI, it's connectivity, it's cloud, it's robotics, it's kind of a mix of technologies. So these are my initial reflections, but thanks a lot for having that discussion.
Thank you very much, Ivo. So we have focusing on foundational research, compliance and tooling, and responding to the cybersecurity threat. Thanks very much for those points. I didn't say it right at the very beginning, but we have a whole bunch of participants in the room, attendees watching this session. If you have any questions to the panel, please do put them into the chat below, and I will be trying to weave those in to those discussions as we go along. Thanks very much. So I would like to now move on to Jussi. Would you be able to give your thoughts and reflections on how we stand with the big tickets, and perhaps also reflect on some of the comments that have already been made?
Yes, quite absolutely. Thank you for organizing this. This is a very promising conversation, and a special thank you to Eva for tossing the ball onto my desk here by speaking about the European language models, which certainly is right in our lane. So I'm at Silo. We're a company. We build generative AI, and the general question: do these tickets match what we expect? I would, yes. The answer is yes. Good tickets. There can be many more, and they can be elaborated, and some of them are more specific than others, but that's the way it always is. I think these are good directions to walk in, and I agree with the previous speakers about collaboration, about various things. But I'd like to say something about. I'd like to begin by saying what I think is missing. The most important thing that I find missing here is the idea of fun and delight, because AI is a fun and delightful and interesting thing. This is why I got into AI in the late 80s. This is why I don't feel, embarrassed to tell people around me that I work with AI. People invariably have interesting questions and expectations and interesting fears and worries about it. And I think it behooves us to feed into that interest. So I would like to think about how we might inject fun and delight into the big tickets and make sure that whatever we do, if we go for a moonshot, and moonshots are dangerous because even a small angular error in the moonshot will, propel you out into intergalactic space, and then you won't get home anymore. So, but if the moonshot is fun and delightful, the side effects are persistent. So I would like to, think about this. This is something we won't solve during this panel, but we're all here because we think this is fun. And let's make sure that that permeates whatever we say. and that what we do public-facing projects will give us fun. I like Robert's background picture here. It looks fun, and we should have more of that. There are many different ways of having fun, and we should, play to those ideas. That's the one thing that's missing. Then I would like to sober up a little bit and return to, Eva mentioned productivity and such, and the big gains from AI, data science and robotics won't be from the moonshots and the exciting and fun things, the sexy showcase projects. The big gains will be from the mundane, boring ones. So we also need to cater to those. I was talking to a prospective client earlier last week, and I mentioned that thought to him and his leadership team, and they said, "Okay, you mean the gray boxes in our org chart?" And we quite often forget about them when we're pushing the boundaries, but that's where the big gains are made. So let's not forget the gray boxes in the org chart. I mean, they're not the ones. They might not even be the core business ones for the company that installs AI, but they would be helpful, in various ways. I won't try to say what those gray boxes are because they vary from company to company. I have some ideas for how one might build a model for where the pull of interest for AI might be, because we're talking about pushing AI here, but there's a great pull, and the template for that, I think, is the TIPSER program, which DARPA instituted in the 90s for search engine development. I was there. I got my PhD partially by working in that program. And the idea there was that some central government agencies pooled resources with many other government agencies that all had needs for textual analysis. So, which meant that pooling resources, pooling goals, coordinating funding cycles and such, made that the text retrieval field, which was then small, this was early 90s, right? Before what we now know as the internet was what it is. Then it was there, but it was slightly different. So just coordinating the needs of those into a common program, focused everyone's interest beautifully. And the people in that room went on to develop what we today know as search engines. So not just coordinating push. We're all here pushing for AI, but coordinating pull. And the captive audience there are government agencies, because they're prescribed to do certain things. So if their needs could be coordinated, that might create an interesting suction to develop things together.
Thanks. You see, I'm going to ask you to hold that thought. I'm going to bring you in later in the discussion to expand on this a little bit. So thank you very much.
That I would like to say, not about that, another sentence is that regulatory clarity is tooling for that is extremely important. This is something I think Adra could play a role in, because regulations, wonderful as they might be, they're unclear, and corporations will be skittish to challenge them, and that skittishness costs us money, all of us. They will be careful of investing in things where they might be sued. So if Adra can help by actually testing the limits of regulation, which no company, no agency will want to do, to have clarifying court cases and such, this would be a wonderful asset to development. Yes, well, yeah. Thank you, Philip, for reminding me. I'll stop here and.
Thank you very much. I promise we'll bring you back in the second round where we can expand on some of these ideas about pooling resources and coordinating activities in a way that generates the fun and delight that you mentioned as well. So, Michael, you're next in line. Would you mind giving your thoughts and reflection, please, on the priorities?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Michael Pfeiffer. I'm leading the AI research department at Bosch Corporate Research. And so I'm in an interesting position as, on the one hand, representing a global company with over 400,000 associates worldwide, over 50% of them in Europe, and at the same time being the interface to the academic research world. So I think Bosch has very early on already realized that we also as a company need to do fundamental research and understand what's going on. And so I really appreciate the initiative here, yeah, to bring industry and research and startups together through Adra in these 3 core fields of data, AI, and robotics, because I think they have really a lot in common. So following this discussion and the big tickets, I mean, it's of course hard for us as a big company with so many different business fields, from mobility to industry to also consumer goods, so to not find ourselves anywhere in these big tickets, because as I said, we start with the fundamental research, but we do have robotics devices both for manufacturing and also for the home environment, and especially in the home environment, but also in just the way we treat mobility data. Of course, the trustworthiness and effectiveness is very important. Similarly, as a big supplier in the automotive industry, interoperability is key, yeah, and we need to have data exchange. So I think it goes really in the right direction. I also want to somehow connect to my previous speakers, especially Jussi. I really like these 2 aspects that you brought up, fun and delight, because that for me is also something where I think we need to address our education system. So I think it's really, I think it's hard to not be fascinated by what AI can do. Still, we do not see that reflect in, for example, the number of students that in Europe go into these degrees. And so we do have not a lack of quality of the talents, but a quantity of talents. And so I think it would be really important for us to also provide, more, incentives for students to study these future technologies. Second, then I also completely agree with the boring tasks that will benefit mostly from AI. So efficiency gains in a lot of the processes in a big company, this is absolutely a topic. These addresses also company internal education, reskilling, and so on. You can really gain a lot there from large language models, and this is something that we are addressing and investigating. And so I think that's the point where I think we should start with the education. Still, bringing industry and research together, I noted 3 things that I think we really should take care about. First is, I think there's really a sense of urgency that we need here. Yeah? So nobody is waiting for Europe, and at the moment, as we've seen, a lot of the investments are happening outside of Europe. So I think we really need to find a way how to not just catch up, but get into a leading mode in the areas where we are really good. That's, for example, the manufacturing industry, that's the automotive industry, pharma, and other disciplines. So I think this is where a good interconnection between research and industry can make a lot of sense. Then I think it's also mentioned in the SRIDA draft that I've read, I think this sense of what is a real world problem, what are really the tasks that are key for the European industry to solve, because there we do see sometimes a bit of a disconnect when we connect to academia, that there's very important benchmarks, but when it comes to the transfer of such ideas into really industrial solutions, there's still a pretty wide gap often. And that's not because universities wouldn't be interested, but simply because they don't know what are the problems. And for example, also regulation, I think this is also mentioned here, tools for compliance. I think this is super important, right? Because the more we generate new rules for compliance, the more we also rely on having good tools to check them. Yeah? And so I think AI can really play an important role there. That, for example, for things like AI Act, we can use AI to help us in fulfilling compliance in the AI and Data Act. Yeah? So I think this is where I think we might have also something to gain. And then, yes, the transfer, the last point, I think at the moment we are also lacking some kind of incentives for universities to work on these more real world problems to really gain more speed. As I said, I think we are at the moment in a phase where sometimes we cannot even wait for the research to be finished, right? Because tools are already existing, maybe not from the European partners, but they are there. We use them. I think, Yeva, you mentioned that you are exploring all the available options. We do as well, and I think everybody does at the moment. And I think there's, I think, some danger that maybe when the tools from Europe are available, this is too late and already others are established. Yeah? And except maybe for the niches that I don't know who pointed it out, 0.1% of websites in Norwegian might be really too little to train a language model. But who knows? Yeah, these models are surprisingly good, even in, for example, I'm from Austria, so I tested it in Austrian dialects. It also works well on ChatGPT. So who knows? Yeah. So overall, I think it's a good idea that we start talking, but I think it's really important that we also have time always on our mind, that we say this needs to happen fast. This needs to lead to a lot of change, and we need to improve as a whole European ecosystem. And it's great if we have Adra holding it together.
Thank you very much, Michael. So we have 3 points about responding to the urgency of the situation. I think that's something that's been reflected in the panel already. The kind of response to real world problems. And in a moment, I skipped over Carol, but I think it's a nice segue into your presentation in a moment, because you're dealing with these real world problems. And then finally, kind of the lack of incentives in the education system to respond to these issues. So Carol, would you mind coming in here? Apologies for skipping over to you, but like I said, it's a nice segue. And your company is responding to some of these real world problems, isn't it?
Yes. So thanks a lot for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Just a few words about Green Meter, what we are doing. So I started trying to help companies with decarbonization through our platform, through a software as a service platform. Practically speaking, it's focusing on carbon footprint and non-financial reporting according to EU regulations such as CSRD. But the main actual advantage why we're also here discussing how to apply artificial intelligence overall is actually to help the companies do something with the transition. So to either decarbonize, reduce their carbon footprint, improve their social scoring, etc., through actionable and measured personalized tips. Now, to get to the points that I believe should be done, I think I see 3 points and then one potential big ticket discussion. One is data area, because for sure, as everybody here hopefully will confirm, to have a proper model, you need to have a proper data to teach it, or to have something to learn from. And then the data availability is, at least in our area, where we are dealing with data such as energy consumption, logistics, material consumption on a company level. Data is not really easy to be found. So I think there are 2 solutions. One is synthetic data, because for sure, for the model training, availability of well and large enough synthetic data sets is a centerpiece to actually build something that can actually work well. That's one. And second sub-point is to have the data publicly available. And I mean here, company data that are available on local level, meaning on a national country level, to have them somehow available centrally. But really here we are talking about anonymous or anonymized company level data, as well as state data, so country level data. So both, I think, through available registrars, at least for us, would be extremely helpful, and also for companies like us. So that's one area, data. Second, data overall is, there are practices and regulations and initiatives focusing on sustainability overall, focusing on the Green Deal, EU taxonomy, CSRD, planning, ESG rating, greenwashing, etc. All of these are there. But actually, to link these 2 together, that's what we are doing. We see the biggest advantage in linking artificial intelligence and decarbonization or sustainability overall. And if we take a look at EU taxonomy, it is very, let's say, only in a few places mentioned that such activities are considered as EU taxonomy aligned. But these activities can be much further, in terms of any kind of metering, any kind of logistical optimization, any kind of material usage, or really looking at the down-to-earth materials and machines that are being used is exactly as has been mentioned here by Jussi, I believe, is the mundane that is happening. But this is actually if each small and medium business will be doing these mundane initiatives with the usage of AI, then altogether added up will actually be a substantial impact. So second point is a regulatory support for and say acknowledgement of these AI sustainable optimization practices. That's the second area. And third area is overall education and awareness. Because here, I think we don't have to be having, because otherwise the EU economy would collapse, but not everybody has to be a data scientist. Not everybody has to have a PhD out of, which is for sure needed, but not 99% of people have to have a PhD out of data science, artificial intelligence, machine learning. But the overall general awareness on how to apply these tools, if we will call them tools, in their day-to-day lives, starting from anybody in the office up to somebody working at an oil rig, is of an utmost importance in our eyes. And this is actually what we are trying to do, to have it more accessible through also education, that it can help. Because if you tell AI to somebody who is not that familiar in the topic, then they might be interested, but also they might be afraid. So this is these three topics, and in terms of the big ticket, I think it has been mentioned here quite some time, which is data governance and security in these shared data. We'll call it not data centers in technical terms, but in data portals. You know, those points that I was talking about that have data available both in the synthetic way as well as in the real way will require the companies and the individual entities not to be afraid to share the data, being sure that they are securely and in anonymous ways processed, but also to motivate companies and to motivate the subjects in order to share the data for, let's say, a bigger purpose. So overall, data governance and motivation of the entire ecosystem is a fourth element. So to sum up, data, a bit of regulatory support, and then education and awareness. I think that's from my side. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Karol. Very nice summary. Data. And it would be really interesting to hear some of your thoughts there on the use of kind of synthetic data and some more kind of actions and alignment around centralizing and anonymizing some of this data for broader use from both public and private kind of industry. So at this point, Rich, I would like to move over to you. I'd like to hear your thoughts, perhaps on some of the comments from the panel, but also on the priorities. Yeah, over to you.
Thanks, Philip. Yeah, and thank you everyone for these comments so far. They've been very interesting, and I've taken a whole bunch of great ideas away from this. I'm particularly fascinated by the idea of grey boxes in org charts. I think I'm going to be going away and the next time I talk to anybody in a large corporate, I will be asking them, do you have grey boxes on your org chart? What's the really boring bit? Because that strikes me as a really nice way to open them up and discuss their pain points. And as those of you from EurObotics will know, I think every time I've stood for election for the board of directors, part of my campaign view has been that we should have fun doing this. You know, there's no point spending your working time not enjoying what you're doing. So I really like that idea. I come from a robotics background. I come from an SME background. So for me, the whole issue with things like large language models and these kind of big data lakes and working with these kind of AI tools it's really hard for SMEs. If you need to spend 100 million to train something, I can't even look at that game. I can barely write a proposal around that game. So I think it's really important that we both look at ways to fund some of those costs possibly, but also ways to make these things more efficient, make them simpler to generate, simpler to train, more cost effective to train, and also have a lower impact of training. The kind of environmental impact figures for the large models at the moment are horrific, I think is probably the right way of describing it. And if we continue with every country deciding that it must start its own program of building giant language models, we've seen one from the UAE recently, we've seen the Japanese are putting out a large language model that speaks Japanese. Every one of these is coming in hundreds of millions of training and a huge climate impact. I don't think that's a sustainable way to proceed. So I think we really want to see a focus on how do we turn this technology into something that can be accessed easily by people at the lower end of the scale. can I get this whole thing to run on a laptop? Can I train it on a single RTX GPU? Can I actually systematically build hundreds of variants on low-cost hardware and explore them? Because going back to the question about academics not really engaging with real-world challenges, there's a very good reason for that. The job of an academic is to live in TRL 1 to 3. And God bless all my academic friends, I would not want you anywhere else. That is where you should be. That is exactly where you can create more value than anybody else, because you can do the new. Going from TRL 0 to 1 only happens in a research lab where someone puts a bit of sellotape on a pencil and pulls it off and says, oh, this is a funny material. What can we do with this? That would never happen anywhere else. The job of SMEs and startups is precisely to say, oh, here's this thing. Okay, how can we scale it? What can we apply it to? What can we do with it? And then a lot of those will exit by selling them to large themselves to large corporates, and others will grow and scale. So I think the role of the Commission here, the role of these work programs and these funding frameworks is to say, how do we efficiently, and this is a different definition of efficiently than economically, how do we efficiently enable research to build new tools that SMEs and startups can take and try and scale and fail and try again and fail and try again until they deliver concrete real-world value to citizens, and to do that within a framework that ensures that they respect European norms, they respect European views of culture, and they benefit us and leave us not beholden to our distant neighbours who might well have very different approaches to this and different policies. So I think that's why I think this SRIDA is very exciting. That's why I think these ideas of moonshots are very exciting, because they challenge people, they get people to think about this, and that's why I'm very keen to do this. And I'll shut up there and let go back to Philip. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rich. Yeah, I think really interesting thoughts there on using kind of research in universities to push out and allow us to trial some of these technologies and fail fast, fail hard, but find the kind of right pathway to kind of success, so to speak. So on that note, we're going to welcome our last panelist, but certainly not the least, Robert Brookmeyer from BMW. You've heard the whole panel here today. What are your kind of thoughts and reflections on both of what they have said and reflected and their own reflections and your own thoughts on the big ticket items?
Yeah, thanks very much. I think this is a great opportunity bringing us together here, and I think the opening statements were very much on point, giving this an importance for us in Europe. Personally, I'm coming from a software development background, and I spent probably 4 decades on this. And currently, I'm in a role to drive the adoption of AI at BMW. And all the big ticket items are really relevant to what we do. I mean, think of robotics in car production, but also think of the vehicle being an increasingly robotic system when we think of automated driving, which we are ramping up step by step, right? So I think there was an iPhone moment end of last year with ChatGPT happening. Yeah, most of us, I would think, have been working in generative AI earlier, but I think that was the point when the public realized, wow, this is useful, right? And that again made companies realize, wow, there's a business opportunity, right? And that really made a big difference, pretty much like the iPhone made a difference to phones that had been out there before. Now, the gray boxes, they're really relevant. I think all larger companies are working on large documents. So how do you do that more effectively? How do you bring quality into that? That's not really flashing, but it's necessary. And it's the kind of performance topic that Eva addressed earlier, right? So this is at the core of what we will be doing at companies in the near future. Because I think one of the opening statements was very true, that companies who use AI effectively will outcompete those who don't. So it will become a necessity to use this. So, and I think we cannot overemphasize the importance of the foundation models. Someone likened them to the new electricity. So this is really infrastructure, and we cannot allow to be dependent on companies outside Europe. Yeah, as much as we wouldn't supply our electricity from there, right? Now, that brings up two important topics in driving those big ticket items forward. I think one is overcoming public skepticism towards data and AI. This is a little bit related to the fun part. I think our headlines in Europe specifically are too skeptical about innovation and data and AI specifically. And I think this is not helpful driving innovation forward. And the second point I'd like to raise is we need to strengthen our local champions. As I said, we need foundation models, all of us, and it does not make sense for individual companies to all work on their foundational models. It's infrastructure. So we need local champions in that who do it for us. And there, I think we have great research programs. Horizon was mentioned, and it's stellar. And bridging the findings into companies that provide those, make products out of them, that's something we need to focus on. And I think in the end, we need local champions who compete on a global level, because otherwise Europe will not be leading in this field, right? Leading means having company success, providing products to everyone, making revenue, making profits. And I think we need to discuss how to get there, because currently it's not happening at the scale, and many metrics are proving this, like investment, you showed it, but also just the number and the size of tech companies we have globally. So that's really one thing I would really suggest to focus on getting this started and supported. And to me, that's a bit the underlying topic of all these big ticket items. So developing the products, making them safe, but making them available to everyone, and outcompeting with those products globally. I think that's the necessity.
Thank you very much, Robert. And I think, that's a really nice segue, I think, into the next part of the discussion, or last part of the discussion. We have about 15 minutes left. So I'd really like to focus this on the points that, these points about how that question of accessibility, and how do you make this technology as accessible as electricity and make sure that it's locally sourced. So I would like to ask Jussi to come in here. If you could keep your kind of thoughts relatively brief, I'll bring in Jussi, and then Yeva, and then Francesco, and then we'll bring in other participants. So if you could just reflect on that. How do we pool our resources? How do we gain that accessibility? How do we ensure that AI is the new electricity?
Well, since you mentioned my name first, I'll go back to my idea of, again, about the gray boxes and the general societal sense. Not look for the media industry, not look for the publishing industry, but look at what are some of the most boring things we do as a society, and ask them, what are your needs? Because those things need to be done. There are plenty of agencies out there that, plod along doing their thing, and they never get asked to roundtables because they're doing, less exciting stuff, customs agencies and patent offices and so forth, and they have huge needs of all kinds of things, and they actually do quite exciting stuff, and they're doing fun and delightful things. I wouldn't want to switch with them, but they're having fun themselves. But they will have expressions of needs, and that would create a pull. So if we can pool their resources, we can pool the legislative niceties of approving foodstuffs and medication with the needs for customs agencies, with the needs of patent offices, which needs of court systems and judicial systems. There will be plenty of stuff there that could create, a research program that's based on perceived need rather than perceived, the push from our side, which would be more the moonshotty thing. So I think there's something there. Another adjacent point there would be that we would like to see a path for data survival for a long in the long run. That would mean talking to memory institutions and having them involved in this conversation. How can we make sure that archives, museums, and libraries weigh in on data survival? They know about these sorts of things, we don't.
Thanks very much, Lucy. Yeva, could I bring you in for your thoughts?
Yes, very good point, Jussi. Let me build on that what you just said. I will give a Norwegian example, even it's a small country, but I think the things that they're doing, particularly the National Library, is worth of looking at. So the National Library created a small AI lab, which they actually collected over a couple of years now. The National Parliament texts, the not only text but audios. They have a bunch of kind of data, and what they've been doing, they've been releasing this openly, the code. They've been training on large speech and language models, and then they've been releasing the code and reference data sets. That could be done for any national library in the country. Just as Rick said, how would a SME, a small company or a startup would start using these tools? So one of the things, not that the national libraries will make a break here, but they need to kind of collect and really be inspired and probably incentivized by the governments to do that. That's a very concrete thing that they can do, because that is a bunch of archives. The second, I have a call to consultancies. I'm not really very fond of what they're doing here, and with all respect to the big fours or big fives. And the reason why I'm saying it, we need a mediator, as Robert was saying, right? You need to continue. And Rick, I really like how you say we shouldn't ask researchers to do kind of groundbreaking innovation and adapt. They should do the TRL 1 and 2 and 3. But we need to have people or companies or mediators. I don't know if it's a silo AI, you call themselves a research-based consultancies, or the big ones, the BCGs, and sort of instead of providing slides and selling slides at a really high cost, I would really like them to see helping companies to bridge research that the researchers are doing to solving real problems. I think they have that access and they have that capacity where we really stepping up. It's not necessarily a thread that's on your table and Adra, but I just say where the pain points are. So we don't have these mediators today, I have to say. And then my last reflection on the national champions. I totally agree, Robert. The national champions can be the ones that are been sitting on this national chairs for years, but there could be new national champions that we really need to empower. And I think the generative AI, this iPhone moment from November last year, shows that this is possible to do. It's just that we really need to find in Europe someone top-notch research communities that you just allow them to do fun. I will stop here and go over to you, Francesco, I guess.
Yes, yeah, thank you. So it's a good question how we can, democratize, let me say this word about the AI. So, in my opinion, one thing that I completely agree with you is that we need to just focus on the real use case. So we don't have to impose nothing. It's something that is coming. It stay for long, so it will stay for longer. And in my opinion, robotics is one of the very important things that we can use, because robotics in this artificial intelligence ecosystem that we are building is the only one that have embodiment. So we can really touch people physically in order to demonstrate that these kind of things are not only on internet in the cloud or something that we can use, but we can also talk, we can also help us practically in everyday life in order to work better and to improve the quality of life, to improve the things that we are doing. And even more, we are still can do something that we don't have enough manpower to do. Imagine what it happens, for example, in the pandemic, that we didn't have enough workman forces in order to solve some practical issue. So in my opinion, if we can just go in this direction, everybody will not have any doubt, will not put any barrier, and will help in order to make this better and better. Another important thing is probably there's champions, company, whatever that Robert just mentioned. I agree on that, but even better, I think that the democratization of these kind of tools and even the usability with the real use cases is the way to go. So if more and more labs using open source or not in order to solve real problem is the way to go. So there's a lot of examples that we have in Europe. We are very good in order to do that. And I'm very optimistic that we can do a lot of things if we can just work together. So collaboration also is very important, and but focusing on the real use cases. So, and robotics could be one of the great champions. Not only one company, but robotics in general could be one champions in order to help artificial intelligence to leading all these new changes that we are working on. So
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Francesco. Robert, I see your hand is up, and I'll bring you in a moment. But I have a kind of additional question to kind of tie all of this together, and it's about how do you stimulate that activity with an air of fun and delight. And we mentioned the moonshot on a couple of occasions already. Is a moonshot idea something where the industry would have appetite for? Is this a tool that we can use to help that democratization effort across Europe? And so I'd ask you to kind of think about that as well. Would you like to come in?
So my point was, I'd like to pick up on the library example and the national champions and the fun part of smaller research organizations. I think it all brings up the field of how do we create successful companies that provide solutions so it can be democratized, right? We need offerings, and I think also the need for mediators. That's also something that needs to scale and needs to make money and to be able to scale. And why is the library example a good one? This is something where public institutions drive things forward, ask for problems to be solved, create solutions, and this is how the community, the technical community, can grow with things that are needed. Because we shouldn't some part of research is la pour la, doing things because they're interesting. What's also good is solving a problem that really exists, right? And so these exist in the public space a lot as we drive forward, say, administrative processes and streamlining them, but then also from the company side. So there are many problems to be solved with ADR. So I think one lever is to surface those problems to be solved and put price tags to them. So that's the value they create. And this creates a market where research institutions and companies, be it also national champions, can grow on. And I think that's something we need to support. And let me go to the ecosystem topic. I think this is something we haven't addressed as much yet. and it's rightfully so one of the big ticket items. I recently had a talk with Sam Altman about, I call it sloppy interfaces. You know, data that you get from companies is pretty well defined. The data structures today are, you know, you need to understand them to interpret the data. But with large language models, you can just combine them with an English question, and in many cases, you will get the right answer. So this will reshape ecosystems in a very fast way. And unfortunately, Silicon Valley has a history in doing that. So again, something that we need to outcompete. Sam Altman's reply to this question of sloppy interfaces and new ways for ecosystems to form and adopt quicker was, yes, it's going to be huge. Yeah, so that also gives an interpretation of what Silicon Valley and the big tech companies are thinking about, how they're leveraging existing technologies and building on it. And if we want to become leaders in this space in Europe, we really need to bring up the problem space and create again the local champions to play in that game.
Great. Thank you very much, Robert, for those final thoughts, actually, because we have 1 minute of the session left. My apologies to the participants who didn't manage to get final words in, but I'm afraid we're going to have to close at this point. Should have booked an additional hour. If I'd known, I would made the session a little bit longer. But this is the first in a series of sessions like this that are dedicated towards industry problems and discussing some of the potential solutions. So the next in the series will be held at the ADRF at the end of the year and focus on kind of scale-up activities and funding. But I think it would be really useful to kind of continue this discussion offline now with participants. So after the session, we'll be in contact and we'll be talking to you all about future activities and next steps. So thank you very much for your engagement. It was a really fascinating conversation. And thanks again to our participants and and to those who attended the session as well. So for now, goodbye and see you next time.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.